In the hallowed chambers of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts sat towering behind his polished desk, his face unreadable as he prepared to address Representative Jasmine Crockett. Rumors had swirled for days that Roberts was ready to take unprecedented action against the outspoken Congresswoman, and today seemed to confirm it. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal scholars, and curious onlookers as Roberts raised his gavel. Without preamble, he announced that Crockett faced the possibility of being jailed for contempt, a move that shocked the political world. But what no one expected was how Jasmine would respond and how quickly Roberts would come to regret his decision. Jasmine Crockett stood calmly, her posture poised, her eyes steady on the Chief Justice. She requested to address the court directly, bypassing her lawyers. Roberts, perhaps underestimating her, granted the request with a small, dismissive nod. As she began to speak, her voice carried a quiet but unshakable confidence. She didn't plead for mercy, she didn't lash out in anger. Instead, she began to systematically deconstruct the legal basis of the contempt charge. Citing precedent, constitutional provisions, and judicial ethics, she exposed holes in the arguments arrayed against her, unraveling them point by point with razor-sharp precision. As Jasmine spoke, the courtroom shifted from tense silence to quiet awe. Reporters who had come expecting a dramatic showdown or emotional meltdown found themselves scribbling notes furiously, trying to keep up with the sheer depth of her legal knowledge. Jasmine was no mere politician playing defense, she was a legal tactician, weaving constitutional arguments with historical examples and modern judicial rulings. Chief Justice Roberts leaned slightly forward, a flicker of surprise passing across his otherwise stoic face. He realized, too late, that he was facing someone who had not only anticipated his every move but was prepared to dismantle it. Jasmine walked the court through the protections afforded to members of Congress under the Speech or Debate Clause, explaining how legislative immunity safeguarded their core functions. She reminded the court that contempt charges against the sitting legislator over political speech threatened the very fabric of separation of powers. Her words were not just technically precise, they carried moral weight. She spoke about the responsibility of the judiciary to uphold democratic norms, not to wield authority as a bludgeon. Her tone was measured, never boastful, but the force of her argument hit with increasing power, making even seasoned clerks glance nervously at Roberts. Roberts tried to interject, posing sharp questions meant to poke holes in Jasmine's argument, but she remained calm, addressing each challenge head-on. She cited cases from the Warren Court, quoted Roberts' own past opinions, and highlighted moments in American legal history when the judiciary had wisely refrained from overstepping into political territory. Each response was a carefully laid brick in a wall of defense that grew stronger by the minute. What had begun as a hearing meant to humble a politician was quickly transforming into a reckoning for the Chief Justice himself, as Jasmine's mastery of the law began turning the tide. The prosecutors, sensing the shift in energy, tried to regain control. They painted Jasmine as defiant, reckless, a threat to judicial order. But Jasmine's response was devastating. She calmly pointed out that dissent was not defiance, that challenging authority was not disrespect, and that the courts existed precisely to safeguard the right to challenge power. She invoked not just the Constitution, but the moral legacy of civil rights leaders, reformers, and constitutional defenders who had come before. Her words echoed beyond the courtroom, striking at the heart of what it meant to live under the rule of law. Outside, crowds gathered, watching the hearing unfold on screens and social media feeds. Hashtags bearing Jasmine's name began trending, as clips of her precise, passionate defense went viral. Commentators on live news broadcasts expressed shock and admiration, with some calling it a landmark moment for legislative independence. Back inside, Roberts' face had tightened. What he thought would be a clear demonstration of judicial authority was unraveling. He watched as Jasmine, with unshakable composure, dismantled every legal and moral justification the court had leaned on to bring her here. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Jasmine's argument deepened. She explained how jailing a sitting member of Congress over political actions threatened to weaponize the courts, eroding trust in democratic institutions. She walked through international examples where such tactics had led to authoritarianism, carefully avoiding inflammatory language but making her point unmistakably clear. The courtroom fell into an almost reverent hush. Even her critics, sitting stiffly in the back rows, couldn't deny the power of what they were hearing. Roberts leaned back slightly in his chair, tapping a pen against his notes. His clerks whispered quietly, realizing the court was no longer on solid footing. As the hearing stretched into its third hour, Jasmine showed no sign of fatigue. She answered questions, countered objections, and offered legal remedies that protected both the court's dignity and her own rights. She wasn't just defending herself, as she was offering a roadmap for how to resolve the crisis without damaging the judiciary's legitimacy. Watching her, Roberts began to feel the full weight of what was unfolding. His intention to assert control had inadvertently revealed cracks in the system. And here was Jasmine Crockett, standing calmly at the center of it, holding the mirror up to the highest court in the land. Finally, Roberts called for a recess. He rose from the bench and stepped into his chambers, his mind racing. Alone, he reviewed the notes, the citations Jasmine had offered, the moments she had anticipated every legal trap set before her. He realized, painfully, that this was no showboating politician. This was a legal force, someone who had prepared not just for a fight, but for a principled stand. The Chief Justice stared at his reflection for a long moment, recognizing that his reputation, his legacy, and perhaps even the public's trust in the court were on the line. And he knew it was his move next. When Roberts returned to the bench, his face was composed but slightly pale. He cleared his throat and thanked Representative Crockett for her extraordinarily thorough presentation. He acknowledged that the court had much to consider and announced that, pending further review, the motion to jail would be stayed. A ripple went through the room. Jasmine offered a small nod, respectful but firm. She had not come to gloat, nor to provoke, as she had come to defend. Reporters rushed from the courtroom, their phones buzzing, newsrooms preparing headlines. Roberts backs down after Crockett's defense. Jasmine Crockett turns courtroom battle. Outside, Jasmine faced the cameras briefly. She spoke of her respect for the judicial system, her belief in the Constitution, and her commitment to protecting the separation of powers. She emphasized that this was not a personal victory, but reminded that democracy thrives when each branch respects its limits. She refused to frame the moment as a win against Roberts personally, instead focusing on the broader principles at stake. Her composure impressed even skeptical commentators, who admitted live on air that they had underestimated her. Across the country, audiences watched in fascination as this political-legal drama continued to unfold. Behind the scenes, Roberts met with his colleagues, reviewing the hearing transcript and Jasmine's arguments point by point. He listened to legal advisors, scholars, and even former justices who quietly weighed in. The consensus was clear: the court had overreached, and Crockett's defense was not just technically correct, it was unassailable. Roberts felt the weight of his own miscalculation. He had walked into the moment seeking to impose authority, but had been met with a legal mind that held a mirror up to the court's own flaws. That night, alone in his study, Roberts sat in silence, rethinking his approach. Jasmine returned to Congress, where her colleagues greeted her not with fanfare, but with a quiet, deep respect. She resumed her legislative work, focused, determined, undistracted by the media circus outside. She met with legal reform advocates, civil rights groups, and constitutional scholars, determined to turn the moment into lasting change. She knew that real victory wasn't about escaping jail, it was about strengthening the institutions that protected democracy. As invitations to speak poured in, Jasmine selected only a few, preferring to let her work speak louder than her interviews. Her reputation grew, not as a loud voice, but as a principled fighter. Meanwhile, Roberts began speaking more cautiously in public. His statements became more measured, his decisions more carefully weighed. Clerks noted his increased engagement with constitutional history, his deeper consultations before issuing rulings. The experience with Jasmine Crockett had left an imprint, not one of humiliation, but of humility. He understood now that authority without reflection risked damaging the very court he had sworn to protect. Quietly, he began reaching out to scholars, seeking ways to reinforce judicial restraint and safeguard the court's legitimacy in a fractious political era. The lessons Jasmine had forced him to confront would not fade quickly. Media outlets dissected the confrontation for weeks. Analysts praised Jasmine's performance as a rare blend of legal brilliance and moral clarity. Law schools began using excerpts from the hearing in their classes. Advocacy groups cited it as an example of how public officials could defend institutional integrity. Jasmine remained focused on her work, determined not to be distracted by celebrity or praise. She saw the moment as a call to deeper service, a reminder of why she had entered public life in the first place. She continued drafting legislation, building coalitions, and fighting for the principles she had defended in court. Inside legal circles, Jasmine's name became synonymous with courage under pressure. Young attorneys reached out, seeking mentorship. Scholars invited her to collaborate on research. Even some judges privately expressed admiration. Jasmine responded graciously but carefully, mindful that her primary responsibility remained to her constituents and her legislative mission. She began quietly mentoring a new generation of legal thinkers, sharing her belief that true leadership required not just passion, but preparation, discipline, and moral clarity. Her influence grew, not through flashy headlines, but through the quiet respect she had earned in the nation's most powerful rooms. Chief Justice Roberts, reflecting on the experience, began to see it as a turning point in his tenure. He knew that history would judge not only the rulings of the court, but the character of its leaders. Jasmine Crockett's challenge had reminded him of the living, breathing nature of the Constitution, the responsibility of the court to guard its own integrity, and the power of individuals to stand for what was right. In private moments, he admitted to close confidence that the confrontation had left him humbled and grateful. He saw Jasmine not as an enemy, but as a necessary voice of accountability. As the months passed, the confrontation between Roberts and Crockett became a symbolic touchstone in debates about judicial power and legislative independence. Legal conferences featured panels dissecting the case. Journalists wrote retrospectives about the unlikely showdown. Political theorists debated its long-term implications. Through it all, Jasmine remained steady, committed to the long arc of justice, uninterested in personal glory. She used the momentum to push for reforms, to strengthen democratic safeguards, and to remind the nation that power, unchecked, always threatened liberty. Her legacy, already forming, was one of brilliance matched with humility and fierce, unwavering purpose. And so, what began as an attempt to jail a congresswoman ended as a lesson in the limits of authority, the power of prepared minds, and the enduring strength of constitutional democracy. Jasmine Crockett walked away from the courtroom not just unbroken, but elevated, her reputation burnished not by defiance, but by the depth of her legal and moral argument. Chief Justice John Roberts, for his part, emerged chastened but wiser, reminded that even the highest court is bound by the principles it serves. Together, they had created a moment that would echo for years, a testament to the enduring, often surprising, resilience of American democracy.